Welcome to Midnight's Edge. This is Thomas Connors, and we are talking horror today. We have Andre with us. How are you doing, sir?
I'm excellent, thank you, apart from a little bit rusty voice, but I think that will be fine when we're going to be talking some horror.
All right, it may be fitting. We also have a very special co-host with us for the first time on Midnight's Edge, Mr. H from Mr. H Reviews. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Not too bad. Enjoying the British weather, as always. And excited to be here. Excited to start what we hope to be, and will be, the most comprehensive coverage in horror on a fairly regular basis. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting this going with you guys.
Absolutely, so are we. So that's the intention here. We're going to be making the best horror podcast there is.
All right, well, we have a lot of great stories to talk about today. We're going to go through the news roundup, and then we've got a featured story. We got a first look at Chucky, and then we'll also recommend a horror film for you. So let's get started right off the bat. Milla Jovovich is in the news talking about Hellboy to the critics.
I myself have seen Hellboy. Have you guys seen Hellboy?
I have not, and I don't plan on it. I might see it when it comes out on video, but I was one of those that I was not looking forward to it without the original cast and all that. Yeah.
Have you seen it, Andre?
Not yet, but that's because I've been under the weather. I absolutely want to see it. And Tom, I think you touched on something very important there, because this movie has gotten a lot of resistance from day one. I think that is because so many people wanted Hellboy 3 instead of Hellboy version 2.0. But I remain unconvinced that the movie deserves the trashing it got, because everyone that I've spoken to that have seen it, they don't agree with the trashing. They say that it's not a good movie, but it's like Venom. It has its moment. You'll have fun with it.
That's exactly, yeah. So that is. So I'm probably going to lose all credibility right now on this maiden voyage into talking horror. But I saw it. I was invited along by Legendary to a press screening, and I really liked it. But one thing's, like I said in terms of my the review on my channel, was that what you touched on was with respect to Venom. So I went into it expecting a hard R, dumb, fun movie, and that's what I got. The last trailer should, in my eyes anyway, give you that impression that that's what you're going to be getting. If you kind of went into it expecting anything else, I'd be really, really surprised. But I definitely don't. It's not great, and it's real bad from a technical aspect. Like, technically, the film is terrible. But I can't deny that I was entertained and I had fun with it. So, in my eyes, it's, again, kind of what you touched on there, was that it was like a Venom. Just a dumb, fun, hard R Venom. That's how I would liken the film anyway.
All right. Well, it appears that you guys are not the only ones who are kind of on board with the film. Andre hasn't seen it yet, but Milla Jovovich is talking to the critics of the film. I personally haven't heard anything good. Mr. H, you're the only person I've heard give it a fairly decent review at this point. So the movie was a technical mess, according to you, Mr. H. We do know a little bit about that, isn't that right, Andre?
Absolutely, we do, because this is a movie that usually would have been covered on Midnight's Edge. The reason it wasn't was simply due to lack of resources and time constraints. But this is a movie that has been pretty troubled from day one, with loads of behind-the-scenes issues. And as viewers of Midnight's Edge should be aware, behind-the-scenes issues, they sometimes manifest themselves on screen, especially when the different people involved are making different movies, at least in their minds. And that, I think, is what happened here. And that, I would imagine, now I haven't seen the movie myself, but I would imagine that the reason so many are saying it's a poorly technically put together movie is that different people involved, from their perspective, have been making different movies that then have been mishmashed together into one. Is that an assessment you'd agree with, Mr. H?
Yeah. I mean, undoubtedly, like, for sure. I think the main take-home, and it's important to note here as well, like, attorneys for various parties have denied all of this. That's, really important to kind of just chuck out there from the top. As with all things, everyone's just in straight-up denial. But one of the take-homes from all of this was that apparently Neil Marshall did not have final cut, and it was actually edited by the producers, which, yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. The editing is shocking. Like, it's all over the place. And that manifests itself in pacing. Pacing's, again, shockingly bad. Bizarre choices in terms of the edit bay. Just to end up with a movie which, for maybe like the first 40 minutes or so, is reasonably good, fun, alright pacing, and then it kind of loses itself in not the best way towards the end. Technically, yeah, not there at all.
So Suicide Squad all over again then?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like, I hate Suicide Squad. I think it's one of the worst films.
Oh, me too, I can't stand it. But that's exactly
yeah.
what happened there. It was a movie that was taken away from the director, who since came back and he did a little bit work on it. But there were multiple edits being worked on by different companies. So that was a movie that wasn't good to begin with. It was doomed already from the scripting stage, which is something I don't think that Hellboy was necessarily. But then it got doomed in the editing bay. Yeah,
I mean, that's personally what I would agree with. And because I covered this when I first read the news on this. It is something which I covered, and I initially thought, oh, maybe it's just damage control, like preemptive damage control, because one of the most ludicrous things to come out from this was apparently one of the biggest disputes was about a tree, about the aesthetic of a tree. I mean, is that just like an argument for argument's sake? I mean, why are you arguing about a tree? It's just utter nonsense at that stage.
I have a theory on that. I think really the tree was completely incidental. It was power play between the producers and the director, because what we've learned from Den of Geek and others is that the major sticking point here was the firing of Sam McCurdy, Marshall's cinematographer of choice. It was the cinematographer, of course, is the one that basically, I'm not going to say that he decides, because the director does that, but the cinematographer is the one that suggests the mise-en-scene and the overall look of the film, including that tree.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Basically, what the reports are saying is that the producers, they wanted to send the message to the director that you are not in charge, you are a hired gun. You point the camera and you shoot, but you make the movie that we say. And just to illustrate that point, we're going to fire your man of choice so that you know perfectly well that the movie that you vision and that you want to make, that's not what we want to make. Which, of course, there the movie is doomed right away, because that means that they failed to vet the director and make sure that they had the same vision going in, because that's the most important job of a producer, in my opinion, is that they have to make sure that they're all making the same movie before cameras roll. Now that's something that Kevin Feige in the MCU, and I keep coming back to that, because that's the perfect example of how to do it, because there he makes sure that this is the movie that we're going to make. These are the restrictions. Can you make a movie within those restrictions? Yes, I can do that. Okay, good. No, I think it would be better this way or maybe that way. Fine, you're done. Bye.
Yeah.
That's kind of like how it should be done. And that evidently wasn't done here, because either Neil Marshall, the director, changed his mind after they agreed to make the movie together, or, as I think is much more likely, the producers had one idea for a movie, they didn't communicate it clearly enough, or he didn't communicate his vision clearly enough. Whatever happened, there was a miscommunication, and they started out making different movies, which is extremely regrettable. And the biggest shame about this is that this is the end for Hellboy on film.
Yeah.
Because the movie opened to what, $12 million, and this is a franchise that wasn't able to spawn a third movie in the initial franchise.
Which is sad, because the second one did do well. It didn't do bad. I mean, it didn't do great, but it didn't lose a lot of money or anything either.
It failed to spawn the necessary return on investment. That was the same.
Well, I think that was the problem. Yeah, the second one just cost too much.
The first movie had, because if you recall, the first movie was made by Sony, and it did okay at the box office, but not okay enough that Sony were confident enough to move forward with the sequel. So they actually let the rights expire.
Yeah,
and it was
then
Universal that developed the sequel. And then the exact same thing happened again. That it did okay enough, but not nearly enough that they were really gunning looking for a third movie. Basically, their mood was more like, we got away this time, but let's be really careful the next time, shall we? And then, of course, Guillermo del Toro came, as he's prone to do, with his demands, which aren't always realistic of what he wants for a third movie, and then they simply can't agree, and then we're here where we are right now with the reboot, and that may not be the best course of action, but that's the course of action taken, and now that flopped, that's the end for Hellboy, which is a shame.
Right, and I think you touched on the main thing there, and that was Guillermo del Toro really making the budget overbloated for the second film. If it wouldn't have been such a big budget and been more in line with the first film, the second film, I think, actually made more money at the box office than the first one did. So it would have been, a step up.
Yeah, I think one of the other take-homes from it as well, from all of the discussions which happened, was apparently David Harbour was just refusing to do other takes. So he'd refuse to do a second take and just walk off set. So it was also a clash between not only the producers and the director, but the director and also the cast. And also David Harbour, along with Ian McShane, were rewriting the script as they went along, which is just crazy. Absolutely crazy to think. This could have been David Harbour's big break,
Well, he'll be fine, because just a pre-release hype landed him a role in the MCU of some kind, didn't it? I had to look that up. But he got another major role afterwards, so he's going to be fine. But
yeah, it was only a role in a Black Widow movie, which is set in the past, so it's not going to be a recurring role. Whereas this could have been, his kind of ticket to being on our screens for a good few years in one role.
Yeah.
So Ray Stevenson all over again.
Yeah, bad times. But then the other part of the news, wasn't it, is that Mila Jovovich has cracked on to the critics.
Seems like Mila kind of gets what you're saying, Mr. H, and we'll get to that part here. She posted on, I think was it Instagram, a bit of a little, about a paragraph, talking about how the film was received by the audience and critics. She states, "It's always stressful on an opening weekend, and Hellboy movie is no different. You work super hard to make something fun and entertaining and have to absorb the negative reviews by critics. But hey, that's showbiz, baby. All I'm gonna say before going to bed is this. All my raddest films have been slammed by critics. It's fucking hilarious. Dazed and Confused, seriously, classic movie." I don't remember that getting a lot of bad reviews. The Fifth Element, you would have thought it was the worst movie ever made if you read the reviews in 98. Zoolander, slammed. Joan of Arc, disaster. Resident Evil, let's not even go there. Anyway, every one of those films is now a cult classic. Every single one. And this will be too. Mark my words. Why? Because of the amazing actors. The movie is worth seeing just because they're in it, especially one that's so much fun to experience as this one too. And she also goes on to praise the director, Neil Marshall, who you brought up. And she basically says what you had said in the outset, Mr. H, is that it's a loud, gory mess only a teenager would love. And that's basically what she's saying they set out to make. So she's not totally wrong in what she's saying, I guess, in a way. What do you think, Mr. H?
Well, I mean, I agree that it is just a gory, fun movie. But she's also kind of, look, She's actually quite a good actor, but she's really got to stop, praising the movies that she's been in, like Resident Evil. For God's sake, that what are you doing? Don't use that to bolster your argument. The first one's fine. Everything else after is just an absolute disaster. So
I like Resident Evil, at least the first one.
Yeah, so you're probably, I don't know about Mr. H, but I don't.
Nah, look, yeah, the first one's fine. Everything else after is just an absolute disaster.
Yeah,
so.
that I'm not going to disagree with. But the first one, I had an enormous amount of fun with.
Yeah.
Ditto The Fifth Element.
The Fifth Element's great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. My God, that's like the best 2000 AD movie there's ever been.
Yeah.
But that Joan of Arc, is that a cult movie?
Nah.
I don't know what she's even talking about,
yeah. She needs to stop. Just this level of damage control doesn't work when you're referencing garbage to try to, save the damage control, the damage control of your current movie. Because if you're going to compare them, Hellboy to Resident Evil, if you're going to use that as a comparison to try and get people in to watch your movie, it's not going to work. That's a bad move by any stretch of the imagination. Like Hellboy, she closed it with the right words, and that's what she should have just led with, is that it's a loud, gory mess that teenagers or people that are young at heart, right? People that just wanted to go in for something which is, like an R-rated kids movie. Do you know what I mean? Something along those lines.
Along the lines of a slasher film, kind of almost, but the same kind of, not like the same setup, but the same kind of experience.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take itself seriously. And a lot of people say that that's a bad thing, but I completely disagree. Like, a movie that is self-aware and not serious works. Like, this movie is well aware of what it is. Like, yeah, it's crap with the editing and, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but not every critic is slamming it. Like there are a fair amount of people that enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I just said, if you enjoyed Venom for what it was, you would probably enjoy this because it's kind of like a hard R Venom, kind of spiritual, reminiscent to Venom in that way. So.
See, I got more of a Deadpool vibe than a Venom vibe out of the trailers, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I guess so. I mean, I only used Venom because it was out so recently.
But yeah, I guess
that's the perfect comparison, though, because that's also a really trashy movie that was so close to not working. And in my opinion, it was just the interaction between Venom and Eddie Brock that made it work. Had it not been for that whole movie could have been written off.
Yeah,
so that was so. So I think it's a really good comparison. Also, I have to say though about Milla Jovovich defending the movie, I agree completely that her previous catalog of movies that were all slaughtered but are all rad statement, which it's in massive need of some qualification or modification or however you want to put it. But I absolutely see where she's going with it, because you know what she's doing? She is sending the message to future collaborative partners, future producers, future directors, future whatever. Look at me, I'm on Twitter and I'm actually promoting the movie. I'm not creating more damage by tweeting out of turn. I'm not a liability, unlike some other actors and actresses we could mention out there. Or producers or director for that matter. This is someone who's a team player, and when they hire her, they get someone that's actually going to promote the movie. Maybe not with the best means, but they're at least going to try.
Yeah.
And I think that's much of the reason behind that. It's as much strategic securing her next job as anything else.
Moving on with the news roundup, because our news roundup is taking forever. I am not a huge fan of the Conjuring series. I've seen Annabelle. I haven't seen the sequel. I have not seen The Nun. Now, I know you two have, and you both kind of perked up when this news came up. Tell us first off what you guys thought about The Nun.
Well, first let me begin by saying that as a general thing, I am a huge fan of the Conjuring cinematic universe. I liked all of those movies, and I was really, really excited going into The Nun. And I left it tremendously disappointed. I absolutely hated the movie The Nun, equally much because of the movie that it was, as disappointment over the movie that it could and should have been, but wasn't. The problem with The Nun, in my point of view, was that it had too much money to waste on special effects when it should have been something more along the lines of the other Conjuring movies. Something really down to earth, with some strategic jump scares and really simple effects and everything. Instead, you had like this generic CGI crapfest wannabe horror movie that was just an overall piece of shit. And the reason that yeah, that's what I think about it. I was so disappointed because I thought that the nun in The Conjuring 2 was such a great character. Just the look of the character and the potential there. I was so excited by the potential for what could be done with a movie such as this. And like the tease in Annabelle Part 2, my God, I left Annabelle 2 more excited for The Nun than I was about having seen Annabelle 2. And for the record, yes, I do like the Annabelle movie, so shoot me. But anyway, I saw the movie and I absolutely hated it. So that's my thought about the first, The Nun, and we'll get back to why the sequel news piqued my interest. But first, I'm going to hand it to you, Mr. H. What did you think about The Nun?
Mine's short and sweet. It's trash.
Oh, there you go.
Nah, like it's just everything which is bad with horror in my eyes. Like I agree. The universe as a whole has its interesting moments and its compelling parts, but The Nun is just the biggest pile of trash ever. And I know I'll probably get some hate for saying that, but when you've got two movies that came out, I'm fairly certain they're both out in the same year, like Hereditary and then The Nun. I think I'm right in saying that, or
Was
No,
the
you're
one
right,
this
you're
year?
right. Yeah, no, they were both last year.
Okay.
Hereditary was the movie that None should have been.
yeah, a tense, gripping, atmospheric, uneasy film. Hereditary, for all of its detractors and things like that, is everything right with horror. It goes back to its old school roots. The Nun's just trash.
It's just a piece of shit, exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, the reason that this sequel news piqued my interest is because now we get another shot at the movie that The Nun should have been from day one. Didn't work the first time, maybe it'll do better in the sequel, because at the box office it did bang, or at the box office it did freaking amazing. So let's just hope that the sequel is going to be more akin to Hereditary, which is the movie that I want The Nun to use as an inspiration. However, the sequel is scripted by the writer of Hellfest. Mr. H, are you familiar with that movie? And if so, what does that lead you to think about the Nun sequel?
Well, that's not the part which actually caught my eye. The part which caught my eye is the fact that they have also worked on American Horror Story, which, again, for all of its detractors, does do kind of tense atmosphere quite well. American Horror Story is not hugely scary or anything like that, but the fundamentals of a horror story should be the fear of the unknown. A jump scare is not the fear of the unknown. So this Akilah Cooper, who's worked on American Horror Story, should, because again I'm not familiar with Hellfest, but should have a good concept of this kind of tense, gripping fear of the unknown, which is again why Hereditary did so well.
Right, and that's one of my biggest problems with horror now, is everything's turned into a jump scare. There's no suspense. Suspense isn't walking down a dark corridor knowing something's going to jump out at you. Suspense is there's a bomb under the table and nobody there knows it's there. Only the audience does. That's what suspense is, and they've lost that in so many horror movies, and that's why I've really fallen out of a lot of the Conjuring series. I'm sure I could probably get into a little bit more so, but I'm so sick of the haunting of this and they're all the same thing anymore. It seems like it's a bunch of, like you were explaining, The Nun was a bunch of just nonsense special effects for no good reason. That's not why I want to see a horror movie. Yeah, the effects are cool, but they're nothing without a great story and something to pull you in, and we'll probably talk about that a little later in our recommendation too. It'll come up again, but that's kind of what you need, is something that's gonna pull you in. The effects are secondary, and even George Lucas has said that, sadly.
We can't kind of double back on that, didn't we?
Rather ironically.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, anyway, let's just hope for the best. Because the potential for a great The Nun movie is there. Wasn't realized last time around, so fingers crossed for the next. What's next?
It's been confirmed there is 100% a new Critters movie underway called Critters Attack. It's been rated R, obviously for bloody creature violence, and it's not, again, I repeat, it is not related to that kind of TV web series thing that dropped, because obviously that was, a joke in and unto itself. This is something which was long rumoured to be in development, but of course when we had the TV series that then muddied the water, people weren't really aware of what was going on. So what do you guys think of all of this? New movie, not associated to anything else, your thoughts?
I love the Critters, so I'm very excited for a new movie. I just hope that it's going to be in the same vein as the first two Critters movies, or as I call them, the good ones, whereas everything else after that, especially chapter 4, is just the chapter of sorrow, as we say in Norway. So, yeah. I'm really happy to see that it's been rated R. It would suck if it had been rated anything else, because if there's a franchise that needs to be rated R and be a little bit gory, well, actually, there's a crap ton of franchises like that. But Critters is definitely among them, so I'm quite happy to hear this. But we have a huge Critter fan among us. So, Tom, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, we've actually known about this 5th movie for a little while. We recently did a mini documentary where we did report on this. I did a review of the recent Critters series that was also brought up. That was a disaster. This I have some hope for. It's being produced by Sci-Fi, but they're following the same format they did for Leprechaun Returns, I'm imagining, where they'll release it on digital ahead of time with the R-rated version, and then I think the version they show on TV is cut down a little bit. I can't say that for sure, but that's what I'm guessing. This would actually be the first time the Critter series would have been rated R as well, which is another interesting twist. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens here. We also had rumors that Dee Wallace would be showing up, possibly because she was in the area while they were filming this, and as anybody who's seen the original knows, she was in that one. So curious to see what happens here with this. I really, really am. I'm not sure about the title, Critters Attack, but I am kind of curious to see an R-rated Critters movie. I know I keep saying curious, but I'm a big Critters fan. Like Andre, I love the first 2 films. The third one's okay. 4th one's almost unwatchable, but that series gives me some newfound respect for the 4th film. I'll say that for sure. So besides our Critter documentary, you might want to check out our interview with Bob Shaye, who of course was the producer of Critters, and he has a whole bunch of insight on that movie and a whole lot more, so do check that out. Another film I'm curious about, though, is Rob Zombie's next movie, and that one is called 3 from Hell, and it looks like we're getting that this year finally. It is the long-awaited sequel to Devil's Rejects. We're all fans here of Devil's Rejects, I believe. Am I right, Mr. H?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This one caught my eye when it kind of came out of nowhere that this was happening. And now to hear that it's going to be dropping this fall is just, it managed to get through it quite quickly. Whether that's good or bad, it obviously remains to be seen, but I am very, very keen to see this.
Yeah, so am I. I wasn't a huge fan of House of a Thousand Corpses, but The Devil's Rejects, my god, that was a movie. I have very mixed feelings towards Rob Zombie. He can be really good or really bad. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a return to the really good Rob Zombie. I hope, at least.
Yeah, I remember him talking about wanting to do this for a while now, and it finally getting off the ground, so my fingers are crossed. I, too, was not as big a fan of House of a Thousand Corpses as I was Devil's Rejects. Devil's Rejects was just like, oh my god, why isn't this guy the one making Texas Chainsaw Massacre? It didn't make any sense to me after I saw that movie. It's like, this is definitely the guy you should have remaking that instead of what's-his-face, and why is Rob Zombie making Halloween is beyond me. And then, so like you, I'm like, most of the time I'm like, oh, Rob Zombie movie? No. But yeah, Devil's Rejects was one of those that it just grabs you by the balls and does not let go through the whole thing.
Yeah, so it's going to be exciting to see what happens with that one. And that pretty much covers the news roundup. So Tom, what do we have for the featured story of the day?
Well, we have a whole bunch of Child's Play news for our main story. First off, Mark Hamill was recently announced as the voice of the new Chucky doll. We also got a look at the new Chucky doll in an image, and a trailer dropped. Anyone who's followed my coverage on Midnight's Edge After Dark knows I'm not a fan of this idea, especially since the original series is still ongoing. Chucky's alive and well with Brad Dourif and Don Mancini, and all those guys are still working on stuff, and that's going to be coming down the road here as well. So tell us, Mr. H, how you feel after the image, Mark Hamill, the trailer, everything.
So yeah, the new Child's Play trailer dropped, and to me, kind of confirmed some of my main issues with it. I don't know what the viewers will think on this, but one of the main things which actually got me excited, because of course this is a remake, it's just a straight cut remake. One of the things which got me excited was Mark Hamill doing the voice, and I most people will be aware, hopefully you all are, he is the voice of the Joker. I thought, fantastic, we're going to get something really special here, because he's an accomplished voice actor. He's not just a little bit here and there. He is a fantastic voice actor. And then that trailer dropped, and he sounds like, again, correct me if I'm the only one feeling like this, but it sounds like he's doing a Brad Dourif impression. Again, like, you guys can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, what do you think with that, Andre?
I am in complete agreement with just about everything. The franchise as a whole really doesn't mean a lot to me. I know it has its fans, but I'm generally not among them. Like, Child's Play is like, yeah, it's fine, but it's no more than that to me. The remake itself, like, I really don't see the point of it, since the original series is still ongoing. But the one thing that had me excited was, as we've established, the casting of Mark Hamill as the doll, as Chucky. And that's brilliant casting. That's like, yeah, okay, it can really work with him. So that's pretty awesome. And now hearing the voice, and granted, we only heard like that one line. It could be that one line has been specifically recorded for the trailer, or that he sounds extra much like Brad Dourif in that, and he goes another direction in the rest of the movie. But I agree, it sounds a lot like a Brad Dourif impersonation, which I guess could be either subconscious or deliberate, depending on how much he was influenced by Dourif's performance. So yeah, is that a good thing, or is it a bad thing? Is it a completely pointless thing? I don't know, but again, it goes back to the point with like some previous remakes that we've mentioned, that their problem was that they didn't deviate enough.
No differentiation,
exactly.
Is there? There's just nothing. Like, what's the point of it if it's going to be a carbon copy of the original? The original's still there. Differentiate itself, for God's sake. And it's a little bit different to all the others that have been mentioned, because it's not just the fact that, it's a remake and it's basically a carbon copy, because there are some differences, but it's also the fact that the original is still ongoing. The original series is still there. So not only are you having a carbon copy of the original story, essentially, with some minor alterations, but it's that plus the fact that you're remaking it whilst the original series is still going. So it's kind of like, why even bother?
Exactly. I do see, though, that the big change that they seem to be doing is by increasing the focus on the AI and robotics and interaction aspects. That basically, because the house is a smart house with all the benefits and disadvantages that come with that. Mostly disadvantages in the terms of Chucky himself, because evidently then he can control the entire house or has access to all the surveillance or something like that. So I think that the message of the movie is going to be, got a smart house, make it dumb.
You mean as dumb as this Terminator remake called Child's Play with Chucky in it? Yeah, I mean, he looks almost exactly like the original, only just not. And it's like an off, weird kind of... We'll get into that. Anyway, the whole Mark Hamill thing, too, I was like, oh, so you want to do something different, and then you turn around and ask Mark Hamill to do his best Brad Dourif impression, or what? And granted, like you guys said, this could just be one line, and he could be doing something completely different in the entire movie. And, I agree. Mark Hamill was inspired casting, but... I'm getting a lot of shades of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. As soon as they announced Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see that. But again, it's like, it reminds me of this little cartoon that somebody put up on our Facebook group. There's a Child's Play remake, and it says, close the gates. Mark Hamill's doing the voice of Chucky. Open the gates just a little. It's like, yeah, I'm curious to a point, but it's like, really, though, is it just a stunt, or is it going to be worthwhile to have Mark Hamill actually do the voice? Is he going to stand out? I mean, Jackie Earle Haley could have done a great Freddy. He just had a shitty script to work with. Is that what we're going to get here?
Yeah.
And he had a shitty director, too.
Well, yeah, on top of everything else.
He directed one music video like 30 years before, and the shitty studio behind him, and basically just everything was wrong. That's what annoyed me so much with that remake, is that they were too tied down to the original that it really hampered them. And just seeing this, as Mr. H, as you pointed out, it's the same story, it's the same doll, so what's going to be different?
Yeah, that's why I said I'm getting shades of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. It's like, it's pointless.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
And also, I have another worry in there. Or not
Yeah.
worry so much, but another
Yeah.
cause for pause. Because the thing that I'm thinking is, why do they do this? Why do they remake Child's Play? Well, the obvious reason is because they can, and screw whoever is carrying on the original series right now. However, how long are they going to be doing that? Because you know what is happening at MGM right now? There's a change of creative management. There's two guys that have been brought in. Two brothers. You may have heard of them. The Russo brothers. You know, the ones who directed Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and Captain America Civil War, and then
Endgame.
Avengers Infinity War, and now Avengers Endgame. And they are the ones that are going to creatively be in charge of MGM going forward. They are the ones that are going to be making the calls of what gets made and what does not get made. And this Child's Play remake, that's something that was made and ordered by the previous management. It's not something that they wanted. It's not something that they asked for. We don't know what of MGM's extensive library that they are going to mine, but who is to say that they're interested in pursuing Child's Play at all, unless this remake does incredible at the box office to the point where they can't but continue with it.
There's even a question of whether or not they can do a sequel. I don't know if that's even been answered yet. I've seen other people finally ask that question after I did months ago. Because
I believe they can. They can.
Yeah, that's what I don't know, because I know Universal owns the quote-unquote sequel rights. That's the problem.
well, they own the rights. Yeah, they own the rights to the sequels. But if you're rebooting the original movie, you can still make a sequel to it as long as it's different enough. Because
here we go with the differences again. Yeah, like Star Trek.
But you see what I mean? Like they would have to, because there's, I mean.
Well, because I remember when we were first reporting on this, we were talking about it with Susan Layton from 1428, and she had said something that I was also kind of hearing, and that was they weren't even sure at first if they could use the name Chucky, because she told us that the director kept referring to the doll as Chucky, and everyone had to keep reminding him that they weren't sure if they were going to get the name yet, or that wasn't the name at that time. And it's pretty obvious from this trailer and everything that it's the original script before they changed it all with Charles Lee Ray and all that kind of stuff, and as you guys talked about, and the look is so atrocious. I mean, first of all, it looks too much like the original, which we keep saying, but then at the same time, it looks worse. It looks fucking worse than the original. I mean, I don't know, what do you guys think, Mr. H?
Yeah, so my thoughts on how he looks. It looks like he's 3D printed. And I know that's a weird thing to kind of just jump in. But I'm looking at it now, like I'm looking at an image. He looks like he's 3D printed. Which, like that, I guess that's kind of fine. But then, I don't know, it just looks too plasticky, looks... I don't know. I'm not a fan, unfortunately, of this new look. The eyebrows look, just the whole face looks weird. And I know it's going to look weird because we've got the uncanny valley going on, but it just looks just strange to me. And again, doesn't look different enough. Looks too similar. I will say this though, as part of the trailer, we did see him move. I thought that looked quite good. So I will give some props. I thought the movement looked quite good. You know, we can see his feet walking. I thought that was quite a good effect. But all in all, yeah, I don't know. I'm not an overall fan of the appearance. Very 3D printed, very plasticky. Almost plasticky yet CGI, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's something which you got the impression of.
Kind of, but my biggest issue was the design itself, which, as we've all touched upon, it's too similar to the original. One go-to example that I have right here is It, the remake of the Stephen King miniseries. Because if you see the design of Pennywise in the original versus in the new movie from last year, which incidentally has the same producers or something as this remake right here, as the trailer made a point of saying. then there they took it in a different direction, which really worked for the movie, because that way you're able to differentiate Tim Curry's performance from the performance of one of the billion Stellan Skarsgård kids who played the new Pennywise. And that's kind of like what they needed to do here. I remember before we first ever saw the doll, I was a little bit excited to see where they were going to take him. But no, they took him in literally the exact same direction. They only modified him so he looked more CGI and more clean and more smooth and a little bit more uncanny valley. I can kind of like see how that works. His motions, what little we saw of them, was fine. We'll have to say though, that one scene in the trailer, or that one shot in the trailer rather, where we see him like limping along carrying that axe, that reminded me of a lot of something I've seen in a zombie movie one time. I'm not sure which one, but I think there was like a scene in, could it be the first Resident Evil? Since we spoke about Mila Jovovich earlier, I don't know, but yeah, it looked like one of the zombies from what I think was Resident Evil. Is that deliberate or something? I don't know, but anyway, just that kind of like walk and limp, also similar to what the Terminator had after being battle damaged in the original movie. Probably like that's incidental, or that's probably deliberate, since there's such a focus on AI in this one, appears to be, which makes me curious about how does Chucky come to life? Is it the soul of a killer here, or is it just an AI run amok?
Confirmed to just be AI.
Is it just AI?
Sadly.
Oh.
Apparently the plot leaks, and you can see it as part of the trailer, because there's a factory worker that kills himself. He jumps off and lands on like a car or something like that, right? Chinese factory worker changes some of the programming and then kills himself. That's in part of the trailer. So. Oh well,
that goes to tell you exactly how much that trailer made an impression on me.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, here's a question, right? Will you guys go and watch this opening weekend though?
I'll pay for Toy Story 4 and then I'll sneak into Child's Play. No, I don't.
As for me, no. It's going to be a trailer that's going to have to blow me away.
Guys, got some bad news for you though. We now run the best horror podcast there is, so you're going to have to see it opening weekend.
Yeah, of course. Well,
you didn't think of that, did you?
Nah. Usually I have Rob for these things. Like, for instance, when I don't feel like watching Star Trek Discovery, I just outsource it to him. But in this case, I have to suffer through it myself, don't I?
There you go. See, you will be on that opening weekend.
Yeah, well, I have changed my answer. Yes, we're going to see it opening weekend.
Oh, I'm sure I will anyway. I would have anyway, because I'm a lot bigger Chucky fan than anybody probably knows.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Well, but let's move on to something much nicer, because I think we can all agree that the Child's Play remake is something that we'll see out of literally obligation. But one thing that we're going to be doing in this podcast is that we're also going to be recommending a movie that you otherwise might not have heard too much about. Kind of horror movie that's not going to get too much press, something that could be current, smaller indie movie, or a classic from ages bygone. And what movie do we have for you this week, Mr. H?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is probably going to become my my favourite part of the podcast, doing this recommendation. This week we have something which is incredibly divisive, even for a small indie film, and it is called The Headhunter. I mean, I mispronounced this dude's name, so you're probably going to slaughter me here, Andre, because obviously he's from your homeland. He is your native brother.
Yeah, so I could do it then, so I don't have
I'll
to
let you
slaughter
do it.
Yeah. The movie stars Christopher Rigg.
Okay. So I said it was Christopher Rye. I got that completely wrong. Oh dear, oh dear.
I would have said Christopher Riggs, so I guess we're all in the middle, and he's...
Fair, though. I think I can say on his behalf as well that us Norwegians, we are used to people having problems with our pronunciation in general and our names in particular. Have a crack at my surname, for instance. So, yeah, there you go. But yeah, let's move on, because this evidently is something then from my neck of the woods, which is why I would like to emphasize again that this movie was Mr. H's pick. Although it's one that I am very happy with.
Well, I mean, look, I've discussed at length about this movie, and I would be genuinely keen to hear your thoughts on it.
I went in completely blind. I had no idea what this movie was going to be. Not a single clue. Andre gave me he just said, watch this movie, and that was it. I had no idea what it was about, what it was going to be, whether it was going to be, Norwegian movie, and none of that. It got going, and the best I can kind of explain to people what it became without giving anything away is it's like Conan meets The Evil Dead.
Good comparison.
So go ahead and tell our audience what you will, because I don't want to give anything away, because it's interesting, and that's what I said to Andre. I mean, it's good in most parts. I know you said off the bat that you were not happy about the ending, Mr. H, and I get where you're coming from there. So yeah, and it's a tight little wound movie that has a very small cast, very, very small cast, and works.
I think as well, look, guys, just one thing to say from the top. If you are going to watch this movie, this, I believe, from what I could find out, was actually made for about $30,000. So it's really important to keep that in mind. The kind of best way I could describe this film is that the trailers make it out to be quite a heavy creature feature. In my eyes, it's more of a character piece. But it's a character piece very much in the vein of a creature feature in a horror film. So although you may not necessarily get as much creature feature as you would want, you enjoy it kind of, what's the term, vicariously through the character piece. And the lead, Christopher is absolutely superb. For them to have got such a good main actor is a huge get anyway. Because it does have such a small cast, you may, or again, without spoiling anything, you may or may not be with one person for a very long amount of time. So that person has to be engaging and has to have quite a high amount of screen presence. And this Christopher is absolutely that. I mean, I said before we started recording that he quite literally could be Michael Shannon's brother. He's very reminiscent to Michael Shannon, who is a superb actor.
Andre?
No, as for me, I went in also actually knowing very little about it, because the movie stars a Norwegian, and it's obviously set, if not necessarily in Norway, it's set in a Nordic country, and the setting is, we can tell from the movie, it's not quite during the Viking era, it's after the christening of the region, so we're talking the post-Viking era, early Middle Age, but still there were basically Vikings around, and the movie basically is an alternate take on the Nordic myth of trolls. And the movie has then some thematic similarities to a previous Norwegian movie called The Troll Hunter. Again, I'm only talking about thematic similarities, because in construction and tonally they couldn't be any more different. But what you have here is then one soldier who is obviously a special forces soldier, basically, and he is tasked with hunting trolls. A very unique brand of trolls. And this is his gift, and it is his curse, and it takes a huge toll on him, and that makes it a character piece. And I thought it was really, really interesting, the alternate spin on the troll myth. And I also have to give kudos to where it was filmed. The movie has been filmed in Portugal and in California. And when you're from the region, you can kind of see that it's not filmed here, but still the landscapes were really, really good. And they do a much better job at replicating the Nordic landscapes than, for instance, Vikings, which is obviously filmed in Ireland. And that's something I, by the way, shall never forget the Norwegian authorities for, because they wouldn't give the proper tax incentives, because they're fucking assholes. But yeah, be that as it may. But anyway, as someone with a particular interest in this part of Nordic history, because in addition to a movie buff, I'm also a history buff, this movie has my approval. This was a really, really good alternate history spin. What I will say, though, is that for people watching it, you have to be aware that this movie, much like the Hereditary, it has a very slow pace. Pacing-wise, it belongs in the same class as Hereditary and The Witch and Valhalla.
I would put an asterisk next to that, though. It's slow-paced for movies now, but the story does kind of clip along fast. I mean, you're at an hour and 11 minutes is all the movie is.
Yeah, that includes credits. So it's a movie that literally is a little more than an hour playing time.
Yeah.
But it feels like 2 hours because of the pacing.
I'd call it moody. That's what I used to call movies that like to set a mood more so than just kind of, have a lot of snappy dialogue. And there is very little dialogue in the movie. It could have been all in Norwegian with subtitles and it wouldn't have bothered me.
Yeah. I think just to kind of interrupt briefly, and just to praise something again about this film, which I kind of miss, is the cinematography is superb. The framing of certain shots and the grading, so how they've edited it's fantastic. From a technical aspect, the film is actually genuinely really, really good.
The sound is very important too.
Yeah, the sound design was, again, very, very good. The one main detractor, and again, it's not a spoiler, the one main detractor for me was, and I can understand why they did it, but really long, weird fade-outs. I didn't like fade-outs. Fade transitions between scenes, I'm not a huge fan of. I think it's old, overused, I think it's amateurish. And I understand that they used it to pass time. It's to indicate a passage of time, but I didn't like that at all. That was one of the detractors for me. But outside of that, it's a great film. It's really, really good.
All right. Was there anything else you had to add to that, Andre?
Yeah, I agree with that. Overall, this is an unexpected gem of a movie that you sometimes just crop up. The kind of movie that doesn't get the massive hype, doesn't get the massive attention, doesn't have the budget, doesn't have the marketing, but it's still a really well-made movie. And that's part of the intention of this podcast, is to try to highlight some of those movies that you otherwise might miss.
So that was a very interesting first ever Talking Horror podcast. Mr. H does this kind of reporting all the time, isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I do news pieces, editorials, and then there's a large bulk of my channel which is, dedicated to movie reviews. So I do sometimes, if you're dealing with a good PR company, head round to movies prior to their release. But yeah, I mean, it's all, generally speaking, sci-fi horror related content. So you can find me over on YouTube, just type in Mr. H Reviews, or you can find me over on Twitter and Instagram. I'm down with the kids, at Mr. H Reviews on both of those platforms.
I also have to say, as a maker of editorial myself, Mr. H has some really, really good editorials that you all should be checking out.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I want to thank everybody for listening, and I want to thank you guys for your time. And the recommendation was definitely an interesting film. So if you guys want to see something different, something unique that you don't always see, definitely check out The Headhunter. So, Andre, anything to say before we go?
Thanks for joining us, and be sure to check back again.
Yes, and be sure to check out Mr. H's channel. So, Mr. H, anything to say before we go?
No, just join us for the next Talking Horror, which I will be attending. We'll be discussing all things Alien, and it will be released, coincidentally, on Alien Day. So tune back in for that.
That is right. So until then, we want to thank you all for joining us here on Midnight's Edge.